Thank you for joining us with more Nature Notes with Nancy. I'm now at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area on the Corduroy Road Trail. So named because years ago, the way to avoid getting stuck in a wet area was to lay down logs or cords of wood side by side to run on top of them to keep you from sinking into the mud. The Corduroy Road has been replaced over time with boardwalks on many trails, because they're a little bit safer when walking or pushing carts. Join us now to see some of the features of the Corduroy Road Trail at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area. The Corduroy Road takes us in a transition from a swamp, a cedar swamp, into another type of wetland called a fen. A fen is dominated by species of plants, grasses, and sedges, whereas a swamp, the main feature are trees. So the Corduroy Road Trail is actually now a boardwalk that goes through this wetland, a long twisty bridge, if you will, over top of some wetland soils. The Corduroy Road Trail takes us through a fen, an area that's a wetland all or most of the year, and is marked by grasses and sedges growing beside the trail. We have the boardwalk here in order to protect the plants that grow here from people trampling them. Also to keep our feet dry too at the same time. The area where we're going through takes us through this fen that includes carnivorous plants. Yes, you heard me right. Plants that eat animals. In this case, we have the pitcher plant and the sundew. Both plants are totally harmless to people, but they do exist in areas where there's no nitrogen or not enough nitrogen for the plants to be able to grow. They get their nitrogen then from actual insects. Grasses and sedges of all sorts can be found in a fen. Fens are identified as being areas that are mainly grasses and sedges. Sedges are basically grass-like plants where the blades have 3 edges, so sedges have edges. Many animals use the boardwalk itself to get from place to place, but they'll often have runways or areas where they use the path over and over again to get off the boardwalk so they can be hidden again from predators. Here's one of those runways here. Once your eyes become adapted to them, you see them everywhere. Another runway, and across from it, another runway leading into the forest area. Wetlands are wet all or most of the year, and because of that, some of the nutrients in the soil are lacking. Nutrients like, for instance, nitrogen. Because it's nutrient deficient, some trees grow slower in a wetland than they would in another area. Wetland species of trees include, of course, cedars and spruce and the odd pine in an area where it's dry enough. These trees will grow slowly because of the lack of nutrients. So a tree normally that would be about 10 years old at this size might be 20 years old here in the fen. The tamarack tree also likes to be in a wetland environment. Tamarack actually lose their needles in the fall. Coniferous trees bear cones, so the tamarack is indeed a coniferous tree, but it's not an evergreen tree. In the fall they turn golden yellow, the needles fall off, ready to start new ones again next spring. Notice how the needles are arranged in little whorls on the twigs of the tree. That helps to identify it. Another species identified with bogs and fens are pitcher plants. These plants actually eat insects. As we continue along on the trail, it suddenly changes from being an open fen with lots of sunlight to a dark area, a cedar swamp. The soils in here are dry enough for trails to exist without the boardwalk. But you notice that it's very dark in comparison to out on the boardwalk where it was quite open. Areas like this become places where deer can yard up in the wintertime. Areas where they can be away from the deep snow, find food and shelter from predators as well. The canopy of these trees, way at the top of the trees, is where it's still green. That's what captures the snow when it snows. So down here on the forest floor, it actually remains very shallow snow on the ground compared to open areas, making it easier for deer with the opposite of snowshoe feet for them to get around. Some remains of the old Corduroy road that was once on the Sulphur Spring Trail and the Corduroy Road Trail here at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area. The ground in this forest is still spongy, with the peat moss or sphagnum moss still existing here in the swamp. Many of the trees that grow in here actually started as a seed that landed in an old rotting stump. The stump has since rotted away, and we're left with roots exposed, showing us where the tree that was here before once was. With the old stumps rotting away, we can see holes at the base of many trees, placed for homes for many animals. Or hiding spots for many animals as well. Hiding for themselves, or perhaps even for a cache of food. I hope you enjoyed your walkabout at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area on the trails with me today.